In this video, I'll discuss Year 8 work samples from the ACARA website. I'll talk about the written feedback I would have given these students had they been in my class. This first assignment involved an experiment measuring the bounce of different balls at different drop heights. Students had to graph the data with a trend line, or they could construct a line graph and identify any trends. There was some scope for differentiation in this assignment, as students could choose to collect additional data, for example, by measuring the bounce for different types of balls. In this first example of the assignment, the student's done a good job. She's constructed a graph that follows most of the conventions we've discussed in class. So the axes are clearly labelled, for example. She hasn't included the independent variable in the graph title as would normally be done. So I've pointed that out as an area for future improvement. Also, in the second sentence of her description of trends, I pointed out that she would need to add a few more words to make it a meaningful statement, because we're interested in the relationship between the two variables, not in a variable, one of the variables changing on its own. So I've aimed to give this student clear and very specific feedback on how to improve her assignment the next time, her performance the next time. This second example of the assignment is excellent. The student's constructed a very clear graph and has correctly identified trends from the graph. Her discussion of results is quite comprehensive and deep. The analysis is also great. The student's gone into quite a lot of depth in relating her knowledge of energy transformation to the experimental data in a later part of the assignment. And her written expression is very clear and concise. And I've noted that in my feedback. This second assignment, in this second assignment, students were given the data for a hypothetical solar car experiment. The angle of the solar cell was adjusted and the time that the solar car took to travel 6 metres was measured. Students had to calculate the average speed of the solar car at each angle of the solar cell and graph the results on Excel, adding a trend line. Students then had to interpret the data, identifying any trends. So the problem with the data collected in this scenario was that the conditions were not adequately controlled. And so this assignment asked students to identify improvements to the experimental method. This is an important skill for Year 8 students to learn, as it's part of the achievement standard in the national curriculum. This particular student has constructed a good table. It's reasonably clear. The graph is good as well. It follows most of the rules we've covered in class, such as the labelling of axes and the placement of the dependent and independent variables. The title should normally include the independent variables. So I pointed this out to the student and given an example of an appropriate title. I've commended the student for accurately identifying the trend in the data and suggesting a valid reason for it. And I've suggested to the student that his written communication could be improved. It's not always very concise or clear. This is something we've been working on in class. So I've referred the student to the worksheet we studied in class, which gives tips for clear and concise scientific communication. I wouldn't give this feedback to all students, especially where written communication wasn't the key aim of the assignment, but because it's an important part of this assignment and because I know that this student is very keen to improve, I've given tips on how this skill could be enhanced in the future. This second example of the assignment shows an excellent table and graph, extremely clear and detailed. The student's chosen a really good title for the graph, and I've commended him for this. His analysis and interpretation of the data is top-notch. He's also suggested how the method could be improved, suggested very good improvements for the method of the experiment. And what stands out in this assignment is really the students' excellent scientific reasoning and exceptionally clear writing style. These were both key aims of the assignment. They were part of the marking rubric, so I've explicitly commented on them here.